This video is for The Living Earth, Unit 3.5, Evidence for Evolution. Today's essential question is, how do scientists explain gaps and sudden appearances in the fossil record? Darwin thought evolutionary change occurred gradually over long periods of time. Observations of the fossil record suggest that evolution is, by human standards, a slow process. However, it also shows that evolution does not take place at a constant rate. Sometimes there are periods of stasis, which means no apparent change, or a very slow change. But at other times, there appear to be rapid spurts of evolutionary change. In addition, as Darwin acknowledged, the fossil record appears to have gaps or to be incomplete. There are sudden appearances or disappearances of life forms. When analyzing and evaluating scientific explanations for gaps in the fossil record, it is important to consider all sides of the evidence. Does a sudden appearance suggest that a species or a body form suddenly appeared? Was it simply not preserved in the fossil record previously? Has it not yet been discovered? In order for fossils to be preserved, certain conditions must be met. The remains of an organism must experience minimal decay and environmental disturbance. The remains must be buried in sedimentary rock without excessive heat or pressure. Catastrophic or other natural events, such as erosion and subduction, can affect these conditions. The difficulty in meeting these conditions might explain many gaps in the fossil record. One of the biggest puzzles in the history of life is a period called the Cambrian explosion. The fossil record suggests that about 550 million years ago, during the Cambrian period, there was an explosion of diversity of life. Some argue that many types of animals with different shapes or body plans appeared suddenly. How do scientists account for this evolutionary event? Many scientists think that the Cambrian explosion had a number of causes. In evolutionary terms, the Cambrian explosion event was fast. However, this, quote, rapid event took place over tens of millions of years. Rare fossils of soft-bodied organisms show that complex animals existed before this time. These provided the raw material for this evolutionary spurt. Because some pre-Cambrian and early Cambrian fossils share early traits with today's living organisms, some scientists argue that these life forms are ancestors of modern phyla. But at this point, the evidence for a direct ancestral link between pre-Cambrian and Cambrian fossils is inconclusive. The sudden disappearance of many life forms in the fossil record just before the Cambrian suggests that a massive extinction occurred. For those species that survived a mass extinction, new ecological niches became available. This may have led to rapid evolution, which would appear to be a sudden appearance in the fossil record of many different species. The fossils of the pre-Cambrian are rare, but Cambrian fossils are common. The main reason for this is that most Cambrian fossils are of organisms with hard body parts, meaning external skeletons and shells. Fossils of soft-bodied Cambrian organisms are rare. There are a number of suggestions as to why hard body parts appeared at this time. These include the availability of chemicals for mineralization, which means to make their hard shells, and an arms race triggered by the development of the first eyes. Recent research indicates that genes that govern critical developmental processes formed a genetic toolkit that enabled a rapid burst in the diversification of animal life. One of the best fossil records of the Cambrian explosion is found in the Burgess Shale in British Columbia. This fine mudstone was laid down when the explosion had already been underway for a few million years. It contains the first appearance in the fossil record of organisms with clam-like shells, arthropods such as trilobites, echinoderms, and mollusks, early vertebrate-like animals, and many other strange animals that may belong to evolutionary dead ends. These include bizarre life forms like the Opabinia. Opabinia had 5 eyes and a trunk-like nose. The Cambrian explosion is not the only period of rapid revolution and diversification. Other explosions took place in Earth's history. One occurred about 420 million years ago, when terrestrial vertebrates invaded the land for the first time. Our next main idea: punctuated equilibrium. Many parts of the fossil record show the gradual evolutionary change of organisms over time. However, some parts of the fossil record show long periods of stasis or equilibrium in which no or very few new species appeared. These periods of equilibrium are interrupted or punctuated with short bursts of speciation. The model of punctuated equilibrium may be used to explain these observations, and the following scenario provides an example of punctuated equilibrium at work. Imagine a big lake containing a population of fish. Conditions in the lake remain fairly constant for hundreds of thousands of years. The fish live and die, and some of their remains are fossilized every few thousand years. A fossil record of the fish species builds up in a horizontal stasis. Then conditions change. Maybe one of the rivers feeding into the lake is captured by another stream, and less water is available, and parts of the lake dry up. A smaller lake surrounded by ponds forms as a result. The smaller lake and ponds each have an isolated population of fish. The environmental conditions in these ponds are obviously going to be different. They may differ in the number of ways, or meaning depth, temperature, water quality, and oxygen availability. The small isolated fish populations may undergo rapid evolutionary change as a result of the genetic drift and the different selection pressures encountered in each pond, because each pond is in fact different. Over a few thousand years, they rapidly evolve into new species through the process of peripatric speciation. The process is fast, so none of the transitional forms of fish are fossilized. Then a rock slide blocks the valley, and a new lake forms that floods and combines most of the isolated ponds back together. The fish species mix back together. Those occupying the same niche compete, and some species, perhaps the original species, becomes extinct. In this new lake, the populations of the remaining fish species grow, and conditions in the lake remain stable for hundreds of thousands of years. The fish die and leave behind a fossil record. And millions of years later, a paleontologist visits the area. He finds a fossil record that shows a period of stasis in terms of fish species, followed by a period in which new species suddenly appear. This punctuated equilibrium is a useful model for understanding how the fossil record forms. You may have noticed that it fits well with other aspects of evolutionary theory, including natural selection, common ancestry, and the time frame over which the fossil record has been formed. At this point, you should be able to generate a full and appropriate response to today's essential question: how do scientists explain gaps in sudden appearances in the fossil record?